Welcome. So I want to quickly cover the agenda. We're going to try to keep it nice and tight, but we're going to talk about where Focus is as a project, where we're at with data generator support. We're then going to talk about the evolution of Focus. We started with public cloud, but we've grown since then. Mike's going to talk about the strategic value of Focus, and then Beau's going to touch on what you can do with AI plus Focus within your data layer. We're then going to close with, where is Focus going? So we really want to hear from you at the end, I have a sneaking suspicion you won't be surprised as where we're headed. So where is Focus today? Does anyone have a guess on how many data generators support Focus? Does anyone have any idea how many data generators supported Focus back this time last year? We've more than doubled the support for Focus within 1 calendar year. We saw on the stage today that
yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we have Microsoft supporting Focus 1.4, so we definitely have some updates to do here. We had Oracle support, announced support for 1.3. Google's is out with 1.2. So, and we also have both Snowflake and Mongo in preview right now. So we expect those to go GA anytime now. So the great part about this is Focus is meant to capture your entire portfolio of technology spend. So we started at the top with public cloud, and then we're slowly moving into data cloud platforms, as well as other providers. We need to be in all the places that you're responsible for managing spend. So I just want to quickly touch on this, because I don't know that it's obvious if you're not paying attention to Focus every single day. Focus this time last year had 1 data set for cost and usage. We now have 4 data sets. We're telling the story for 4 different use cases. You have your cost and usage, you're tracking your contract commitments, and you're also able to use the invoice detail and billing period data sets to tell your invoice reconciliation workflow with a much more rich and detailed perspective. To do that, we started last year with 57 columns within the Focus specification. We're all the way up to 123. And I don't say that to boast, it's that we need 123 columns to tell the story and perspective that you work with every single day. So we need a common vocabulary for your commitments, your cost and usage, and your invoices. So outside of the data generators that you see on the list down below, we also have 2 that have certified for Focus 1.2. So I know we have Nebius in the room. I can't imagine we don't have somebody from AWS. So thank you to both of those providers. That list is going to continue to grow. That's how we improve the data quality for Focus for you over the course of time. So that's where we're at. That's where we've grown. But you may wonder, like, well, what is Focus actually, like, what is Focus focusing on? And I don't think I've gone through a single meeting since I joined last year where I don't say Focus for Focus at least 5 or 6 times. But what we're trying to do here is every single release is intentional. So we started with public cloud was the story. Like, that was the genesis for why Focus was formed as a project. But the responsibilities of practitioners have grown over the course of time. So we started with the practitioner, the engineer, the product, and leadership to tell that baseline story for what you're spending in public cloud. We then moved into commitment discounts, and we wanted to tell a richer story with SKU details. We were on this stage this time last year talking about how you can manage your SaaS spend and your platform as a service spend, or how are you spending within your virtual currencies. That allowed us to bring in a richer story for both your engineering and your finance leads. In December, we launched contract commitments. So now you're able to talk with the exact same language with your procurement personas. You can understand the performance of the contracts that you're signing with your providers, and you can do this in a very holistic way that allows you to tie back the consumption you're seeing within your cost and usage data set in a very simplistic and deterministic way. Sean was up on stage this morning talking about the invoice reconciliation workflow that's now available with the billing period and invoice detailed data set. That's critical for your finance teams. Raise a hand here if you've had a challenge trying to understand if your invoice is open or closed. you now have a very simplistic, deterministic way to be able to evaluate those details. And you may or may not have heard about AI over the course of the last 48 hours. I don't think I've heard of anything but AI over the last 48 hours. But that's going to be a heavy emphasis and focus for focus. Can't help myself. In 1.5. So we're going to touch more on that at the end of the discussion. But I want to hand it off to Mike to talk about the strategic importance of focus.
So I'll get it out of the way early and just say that I don't think there's a week that goes by without us focusing on focus. And even this week, we started the Monday, spent pretty much the whole day with the steerco, the maintainers and some members talking through what 1.5 will look like and beyond. But part of that conversation was really looking at just the direction of the whole project. So, we look at focus to really give you the one language for all of your technology spend, one format across all your providers instead of discrete different schemas for every bill. And so, I really want to land the shift that we're building towards focus becoming a formal standard. And that lead keeps widening, as we continue to get more adoption of the data generators. And so we've been working with organizations in the Linux Foundation like the ITAM Forum. We've got a member from the LF Standards team, Joaquin, who works with the project, who's quite experienced with the process of becoming an actual developed standard. And so we think that developing a recognized standard through something like the ISO process, it's the kind of rigor that we're working towards. And it's also looking forward towards feedback that we'll be getting from the Tokenomics Foundation as another driving force for focus development, especially when it comes around the AI spend. And so the reason this works in the picture to the left, it's kind of like a flywheel. Your adoption hardens the demand, and that hardened demand pulls more providers in. And if you went past the Focus Lab this week, we're constantly asking you, which provider, what's the one that you really want in, and how can we work together to build that demand for those providers? And then, we want that to sort of drive in. We would love to see AI vendors, come into the fold here and publish in focus. That broadens the coverage, which then scales your practice. You're able to do a lot more across more of your technology estate, which feeds into the next round of adoption, right? Every release is just kind of another turn of this wheel, and that's why the sort of evolution matters. Focus sort of turns your billing data into a layer your tools, your agents can trust, a single reliable foundation to build upon, rather than those pile of vendor bills that you have to reconcile yourself and translate down. That turning sort of shows up in three ways. The coverage widens first, so we look, as Matt mentioned, we started a public cloud, we've added SaaS, we're looking towards adding AI features to try and get the AI features in. We've got the data clouds coming in, we're even starting to see Neoclouds, sorry. And so, we sort of want all of that to sit on that normalized format, and so it provides that single structure. So next, the utility deepens. We're kind of moving beyond just cost and usage, looking at all the data for the practice needs. So every use case, not just optimization, which sort of lives in the bill, and maybe just understanding of the cost. We're looking at those, invoice details, a contract, and then always looking for feedback here. Where are those use cases of data that you need in this picture, so that we can capture all of those use cases for your FinOps practices that we can then figure out how that fits into this story. And so this community is really steering it. The most widely shared needs come first. So if you share your needs with us, we can start to triangulate what's the demand that we're working on next. And so I'll pass over to Beau for kick us over, but thanks for listening on to that.
All right. So I want to maybe take a straw poll in the room. How many people are using Focus at all in any capacity? Thank you.
Wow.
This is great. When you are visualizing this data, how many are using a particular BI tool like Power BI, Looker, or Tableau? Kind of the same groups. How many are using agents to query that data? Couple. Okay. This is what's going to change in the next couple months, I think. and we're all going to like step in the same stuff that those who are using AI right now are going to find or have already found. What we see is actually very similar to what we've seen in BI tools, in various BI tools. In lots of companies, you'll have the situation where one executive wants a dashboard in a particular tool. They're married to Power BI, or they really love Tableau. And then a new executive comes in and wants a report in a different BI format. Well, here's a problem. Say you're calculating effective savings rate. It's one of the most popular. You heard, I can't remember. I saw him earlier today. Prosperops talk about effective savings rate earlier today. Say you're calculating effective savings rate in now multiple dashboards. Well, unless you include exactly the right logic, you're going to get different answers in different dashboards. Then your agent's going to come along and full on make one up. Just hallucinate whatever column that they'll squint at a column and decide that this pattern matched to something plausible and then confidently lie to you about it. So that's the idea here, is that Power BI, there's nothing wrong with Power BI. All these tools are wonderful, but you have to implement the aggregation logic inside of those tools, which is not tracked, which is not auditable, which anyone can change. Even two dashboards in the same tool could give you effective savings rate in a slightly different way. And again, if you're using or planning on using AI to be able to do this, which of these costs go to the CTO, to the CFO? I don't want to bank on any of these, and then what that starts to look like is, well, focus is a problem, or the BI dashboard is a problem. And they're not. These are different. This is not a data problem. This is a logic problem on top of that data. So 3 years ago, this problem didn't even exist. This is a very high-class problem to have. Now we can compare data sets and understand that you can get effective savings rate in multiple ways, but you want consistent data, don't we? We don't want hallucinated data. So what did Focus give us? Mike used this phrase when we were talking about this, we were discussing this talk of Focus gave us like the pantry, the ingredients to be able to calculate these things effectively. It's the same ingredients each time, the same columns. When we add new versions, we're adding some columns, but we're not changing things dramatically between versions. I think we deprecated one column name in 4 versions, right? It's provider name. That's easy to fix, and we'll go over that in just a little bit. But version is not exactly a problem in Focus. But what it purposely does not give you is your KPI math, your cost type choices, your consumer contract. That is on you to solve. Focus can give you the ingredients. You need the recipe, and you need to define that recipe in a way that can be repeatable across the same, different dashboards within the same tool and across AI agents as well, especially AI agents. So for those who raise their hands in this group, you should be familiar with this slide of standard medallion architecture. Your raw focus data lands in bronze layer. There's some clean and conform that happens. Then you're adding business logic, a little bit of business logic and aggregation to get to gold. Then this is where the problem lies. Your KPIs, your aggregation metrics, they're all getting put into your consumption layer. Tools, this consumption layer, your calculations, tools that were never meant to own that logic are now holding it untracked, unauditable, untraceable. This is where the problem lies. So what do we do about that? What's a great way to handle that? And what AI has made really, really important to do is to add the semantic layer. And the semantic layer allows you to take the logic out of the consumption layer, out of maybe your gold layer if you've welded your logic directly to your gold tables, and to put it into a traceable, one-size-fits-all sort of a dry layer, such that that any consumer can start to utilize that semantic layer. And we'll talk about how to actually create this, but this is a super important thing that, multiple BI dashboards, like I did a lightning talk on this very topic yesterday, and when I submitted this 6 months ago, it was all about BI tools, and what has rapidly evolved, even since I did my talk or submitted my talk, was the fact that AI agents are now the next BI tool. In my opinion, I can see Claude live dashboards, and to me, that's fun. I enjoy slicing and dicing the data and interrogating it, as Mike said. So, but that's so much more fun to me than playing around in Power BI land. As much as I like that tool, it is a conversation, and that data can tell a story. It's now that story can be more of a movie than just a story that we tell. Now, I want to address another thing. I've noticed a lot of people that were in the audience that have come and stopped by the Focus Lab. Thank you. You're now my friends. We're going to connect on LinkedIn, and I'm going to bother you all the time. So thank you for coming around. But wanted to address a question around focus versions. As we said before, this is a reality of dealing with focus data. Not all generators will export data in the same version at the same time. But I nearly shed a tear when Mike this morning said, we're going to spend so much time working on perfect data, building a perfect foundation that we never get to stand on it. And that was beautiful. Was that yours? Or did you read that somewhere? Oh, okay, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I'm going to attribute it to Mike. So what happens is it's okay to have multiple versions of focus, and to be able to query against those versions. Those cost and usage columns really have not changed hardly at all. Again, one column, and we'll go through how to deal with that. But it's standard to have data that's not exactly clean. We're going to do our best, but you can query against a lot of that. So you can have AWS in 1.2. You can have Huawei Cloud in 1.0. You can have Nebius in 1.2, and you can still get a lot of information out of those things. Don't try to get perfection. You'll miss the boat. You'll miss the boat on a lot of these. So don't let the perfect be the enemy of good here. So let's talk about gold views. Just like the pattern of being able to deal with an API that has multiple versions, there's ways to get around having a different version. In this case, we say, hey, look, we deprecated in 1.3 provider name. Service provider name was created or added in version 1.1. The coalesce statement allows you to merge those into a single entity, and if you can put that in your gold layer, all of your downstream consumers will be able to, they won't even notice a version change. So this is where you can do kind of version corralling at the gold layer. This is SQL. This is not necessarily the semantic layer yet. So this is important, but not the key part of this. This is where the bread and butter is. In a metrics contract, you define these canonically in YAML, in a particular traceable format, in code. You put this in source control, where it is auditable, maintainable, pullable, viewable. That way, when you define savings rate, and if you attended my talk yesterday, I had a different version for savings rate, which is great, because now if I want to change this back to a different version or another, I don't have to go back into every single dashboard that has been created upon this data. I change it in one place, I get the same view. Now, great, I'm Beau, you keep talking about BI dashboards, and this is a talk on AI. Why is that so important now? Well, who's going to be reading your dashboards in 6 months? It's probably not you. It's probably not even people that you're building these for. It is probably going to be an agent that's reading your dashboards, even creating alerts, even acting upon those alerts in order to make things happen. So what was sort of a nice to have to corral multiple dashboards in the pre-AI era is now essential. AI made this absolutely essential because even within one AI tool, what are you going to get? You can get different patterns. AI is going to look at columns and squint at a column, guess, and make a sort of reasonable guess that's probably wrong, and it's not going to tell you about it. And it'll give you a number that's, very confidently give you that number. So AI is making this essential to be able to find deterministically what is the KPI that you want to aggregate on, and how do you do it? Just like you have to teach a person to be able to read and aggregate columns, you still have to teach AI. It is intelligent, but it is unbearably naive and will confidently lie to you again. So AI is forcing us into this situation where, again, throw AI at a cur file, at an EA export, at something in BigQuery all at once, and try to get it to aggregate that. Has anybody done that, by the way? Does anybody hate themselves that much to do that? Okay, because that feels like it would be a very painful exercise and one that just is drowning in lies and inaccuracies. So that's not something I hope you don't do that. But again, just recognize that AI is just another BI tool, and it can be taught how to do things well. Okay, here's one pattern that people can use. Beau, what can I just put my business logic and my KPIs into a skill? Yeah, you could. As long as that skill can be used by everybody and that's the right skill to use. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but are skills versioned in Claude? In your organizations, do you get a lot of different skills that you can choose from? Many that are like, no, this is the new version of this skill. No, this is Bob's version of this skill and everything else. Doesn't it feel like the same pattern with BI tools now? We're just in the same boat. We have defined the logic in a place that's not meant to hold it, that's not version controlled, and now we can, again, get confidently lied to. And sometimes I do like hearing people lie to me and telling me I'm attractive and handsome and I look a lot like Brad Pitt, but after a while I do want truth. And that's what we're trying to do with this. So yes, it's okay. Can you get away with putting your business logic into a skill? Yes. Better pattern, teach the agent to use the semantic layer, and then your skills matter less. You're going to say, here's my gold data and my semantic layer. Your agent's going to be using that engine that uses the logic that you define, those KPIs that are important to you, that are defined in one place, and then it can query that data confidently. We don't give it a spectrum of choices. We give it, 4. You can choose from these. Do not elaborate, agent. Bad Claude. Don't make up things, okay? But that's what we need to do. Just like any human, we need to teach them, give them a little bit fewer choices to use, and that's going to allow us to, across agents, across providers, be able to get consistent data from our focus data sets. So this is the butter slide of hey, what does it look like when you have 3 different BI tools and every single agent answering that ESR question in the same way every time? That's going to feel great. That's when we're no longer working with probabilistic, I hope I get this right, kind of tools, and we're starting to say, this is how you define it, this is how it is, this is what the data says, and you feel good about it. And you can take it to your CFO and not, not hope that Claude was lying or something. So, yeah. And I'll hand it back to Matt.
Ooh, thank you. So we touched briefly on where we think we're headed with Focus 1.5. So I want to switch for a second back to FinOps for AI. So Beau talked a lot about the semantic layering and being deterministic. You may wonder, like, well, how much does Focus really need to change to be able to support the AI workloads that I'm already running? And the great thing is that it doesn't actually need to change that much. Focus already has the schema to support a lot of the dimensions that you're using within your AI use cases today. So token pricing for inputs and outputs and reasoning. Your pricing tiers, they map neatly into our SKU details and our SKU properties. The ideas of commitments and negotiated agreements and provision throughput, like these are the types of dimensions that already exist. Like these are strong parallels between what you're already used to within public cloud. We do have some things that are currently in flight. Sean talked on stage today about the idea of like, how much granularity do you need to truly understand the cost of your individual agents? So we have an example here. Again, don't you take a picture all you want, but don't quote me on this. We're still working on it. It's in GitHub, so you can check the whole thing out yourself. But the idea here is that we want to make it as simple as possible and get to the right level of granularity for you to be able to tell your AI story without completely exploding your billing data to be able to do that. Now, there are some things that we feel very confident that we'll be working on, like model identity, so the model name, the model family, the variant. Like these are things that we feel very comfortable that we'll be moving forward with. But there are things on our backlog. So like the idea of like understanding a cache versus an uncached token. We touched briefly on provision throughput. Like where's the actual model selection happening? Are we talking about a regional or a global model selection? These are the types of items that we're currently assessing within the working group. So we kicked off development for 1.5 back in the very beginning of May, and it's going to run through October. So if your favorite thing, the thing that's keeping you up at night, is not on this list, we want to hear from you. We've heard from you for the last 2 days, but we want to continue to hear from you. So if this is something that's of interest to you, if this is finally the unlock of like, oh, maybe I should kick tires on Focus now, know that our job, our responsibility is for the specification to evolve to meet the needs of the community. Like that's why I get up in the morning to work on this project, because it's critically important that we equip you to be able to do your jobs better. All right, so we have a list of QR codes up here. Like these are primary touch points that you may want to go to. You can also go to focus.finops.org. All of these things are going to be linked here. But yeah, that's where we're at, Joe.
Very good. Thank you.
A bit much. All right. Before I unleash chaos and let you all throw the ball like I promised, 2 things. Holding the magic box does not make you louder. Talking into the magic box makes you louder. And also, 2, I don't think if any of you had really good arm accuracy, you would be in a focus session. So please be careful
Brutal.
throwing, all right? Don't hit anyone in the face. All right, here you go, Robert.
Hey, I have a question. One of the challenges, even with standardized fields for example, model names, right? Like, is still the values that get populated by the different vendors, right? So, for example, we've been ingesting like model names from, like Cowsert, Foundry, and Bedrock, and then Anthropic directly themselves, right? And one calls it, Opus 4.6. Claude Opus 4.6, the other says Claude 4.6 Opus, and the other just Opus 4.6. So you still have to do all this normalization vendor by vendor. So the concept of like reference data that is consistent would avoid that. Is that something that is at play, that is not just the fields, but also the field values to be standardized?
So we do have some normalized, what we call a normalized field within Focus. It is actually a very interesting one, and thanks for raising that for us to think about normalizing model names. Matt should capture that note. Because, yeah, I understand the challenge there. I guess the big thing would be consistency. If they're giving you, like if a single vendor gives you the same field every time, I think that medallion model worked well to get you to that gold data in a pretty simple way. But if they're giving you the same field and it's changing all the time, that could be problematic. So I think Focus could solve it in two ways. One, that they could come up with a fixed list of model names, but I don't think that will get out of date. But I think we can at least make a rule that a model name stays consistent over time for a vendor, enabling that medallion layer to then be sort of easily crafted.
And that would then the model family roll up, right? That you're talking about, because the SKU levels are so detailed, you can't really use that, right? Because that is the line item of billing, right? So that needs to be the most detailed. Max sleep syncing is this rate. But you can't really roll that up very well, right? You need to roll it up to Claude Opus or Claude Opus with the version number, and then so there needs to be a couple of levels in there to make it useful. Yeah. And those standardization becomes even more important in these rolled up levels, right? So, but is that roll up what you are going to address in 1.5 of?
I can take this one. Yeah. So. We are actively working on which dimensions. So for instance, this is a way to solve it, is to add additional focus-defined properties within SKU price details. And so the idea of what you're describing, where it's like model name, model family, model variant, like those are things that are on our radar. Again, PR is not merged yet, so nothing's final, but that is a way that we're thinking of solving it. To Mike's point around, like, you want consistency in application within your provider. Ideally, it's a very straightforward activity for them to be able to populate that across providers too. But if there is variation, again, Beau just kind of walked through some ways for you to be able to account for that across various provider perspectives.
So, yeah, I guess the last of that is we could add 17 more columns, and while we're up to 100 and something, the goal is not to get to 1,000. And so we're actually looking at constructs that are in there already that could actually populate a lot of those individual details, less in a hierarchy, but more in a sort of set of collection of data that gives you exactly what you want.
Yeah, because the basic, I won't monopolize it, but the basic business question we get, of course, is like, what is the use of this model across whatever channel we're buying it, right? Because then you can negotiate volume discount based on that. And those channels can be many, right? You can use it in Cursor, you can use it any provider, you can use it directly, API, desktop. So tying that together is a really practical need for us at least. So I hope for others as well.
Thank you.
AJ behind. Well, success.
Thank you. On a very related point, so if you look at the life cycle of information data points that we typically use in our analysis work, starts from the pricing APIs. You start setting up for the right sort of cost inputs at your planning phase. Then it goes into deployment, and you start using things out of Focus, more from a cost perspective. But increasingly, we are also sort of looking up information from logging, particularly JSON logs, around how it was used. So is there appetite to look at that standardization that was just mentioned across that life cycle? So as part of like certifying somebody to be Focus compliant, that not only do they provide a Focus cost and usage data set, but that the pricing APIs or the JSON logs also consistently use the same descriptor for that same SKU.
Yeah, I'll take this one because I've been working on the conformance program that you're describing. As we introduce new data sets, and we didn't touch on it in this particular talk, but the other thing that we're very focused on for 1.5 is a SKU price sheet. And so the idea here is that you can have a normalized price sheet across all of your providers to give you that level of like what if analysis or scenario analysis that you're very interested in doing, and being able to do that in a way that like isn't so burdensome for your team from a planning and an analytics standpoint. Now, every single time that we introduce a new data set, we give a provider the option of going through the certification path for that data set. So, so the answer is yes. Is it mandatory? I can't make anybody do anything, but I won't give you a certification if you're not going through that, at least for that data set. So, you know, I continue to see this evolve over the course of time, but the surety that you're describing and the interoperability that you're expecting across data sets that's exactly what the conformance program is for.
And so the other point that you had there was around kind of going into the observability layer. While I don't think the focus will ever, and I won't say never, but I don't think right now we're thinking about standardizing the observability world. I do think that we need to figure out ways of describing those connections, and that might be something that comes after the spec, not specifically in the spec, because one way of tackling the granularity problem is avoiding putting the granularity into the bill, but connecting it to data sets. And so there's probably some overlaps there that we could do with the OTel Foundation or the OTel project in the Linux Foundation. And then, yeah, I think with the certification program, we're going to continue to try and drive the bar towards, you know, perfection. You know, whether we ever get there doesn't really matter, but just getting better every release cycle.
Yeah, I'd be interested if you have a solution that you've been doing or if you're starting to do it, reach out to me on Slack. I'd love to hear more about it and maybe connect you with people who have done something similar or are interested in doing that. That's my job.
So we've got a question off the back there. Oh, you're going? Yep.
Yeah, well, can I ask? Before my question, comment for Beau there. Do I hate myself? No, but apparently my manager does hate one of the people I work with. She asked one of our engineering managers to get a second opinion by taking all of our AWS, Azure, and Google data, send it through Claude, as well as our trusted advisor data. And
Wow.
you know, $400 some odd in inference later, it basically repeated the obvious.
Yeah.
And hallucinated
Wow.
that we had over $10 million in AWS waste, $10 million per month, which is more than we spend by a long shot. But hey,
Wow.
they didn't know better, and Claude didn't know better, despite the fact that it had all the data. So
Right.
anyway, fun stuff. Don't recommend it. Don't waste your money
Yes,
on that.
yeah. I think I'd rather stomp on my own toe, so yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So question kind of more tactical in nature. So we use GitHub Copilot, and we have it build through Azure. Is there any movement or possible movement of having the Azure Copilot billing data conform to the focus format as opposed to just simply being, you know, you got your one marketplace row and it doesn't really tell you much about, you know, what's actually happened within there?
They are on my list of people, of generators I'm hunting down to say, look, I love your product. I would love to see your data exported in Focus because right now it's hard to see. So yes, they're on my list.
Our voice
Put
comes
very
with,
gently, yes.
Yes.
I just say our voice comes with a certain amount of weight, but it's kind of like a bucket of feathers compared to the customer, and so that's what we've always said from, you know, Focus 0.5 is that your voice as a customer to your account managers and that is it's just so much more pressure than us as a foundation pushing, and so we can collaborate as a community to try and make that growth continue. I think there was a question on the back.
Anybody? Far wall? All right.
Joe Montana. Long ball. Okay.
Hi, I had a quick question around, so the semantic layer, I love the idea. It definitely follows a lot of best practices for a lot of things. The one thing that threw me a little bit is, so you said like you can't teach it, you shouldn't put it in a skill. Because you never really know if they're using the right skill, there's different versions of skills. You like move it to the agent. How do you verify that the people are using the right agent? Because you kind of still have that problem a little bit if you do have multiple agents. That you have, like maybe you have taught it to some agents, not to others, haven't given the full scope. And the other thing is, do you lock your agents out from even getting to the root data? Like it can only go to the semantic layer, or is there some sort of cost associated with that?
Yeah, do you want me to? Yeah, so the core concept too is you don't want to, putting that calculation in the skill is, again, it's okay, it's doable, it's visible. You can open up the skill and crack open and see what's there. But in my experience, I don't, like, skills don't share well across the company. I know that Meta has like a skills marketplace, but that's not like the precision that we're looking for, because you're looking for a skill that would be version controlled and very visible into what it has in it and how, and then you're kind of making the user, when they're selecting that skill, pick that particular skill. What I've seen is you've got Bob's skill, you've got Jan's skill, and they might look kind of the same, but they're slightly different. They're not the code level precision that comes from defining this in YAML and being able to see character by character changes in how that's calculated. And so the idea is that once you create that, define that KPI, and you run it through a semantic layer engine, which are available in they're open source tools, they're available in most data clouds and things like that. That is what's no longer interpretable. You then take the skill and you say, don't point at the data, point it at the engine, the API that's there, or the data that the layer created, and query that. Definitely don't point at the raw data, but don't try to do your own calculations, because that's kind of letting the cook decide whatever they want to do in the kitchen. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Yeah, I think so. Okay.
So the more things you add to the semantic layer, the less need there is for the agent to go around to the raw data. And the point is like when you ask, whether it's an agent is asked or you put it into like an MCP into an LLM, when you ask for effective savings rate, it's not trying to figure out what that calculation is. It's hitting the semantic layer, and you can see that menu of pre-cooked cakes and pick that effective savings rate from there as a preference over coming up with its own formula. And then, yeah, I think at the skills layer is you're just trying to prevent from having to share that mathematics across the skills. You're just telling it there's a semantic layer and these are the models that are in there that you can actually hit for these features. And the more you enrich that layer, if you update the way you want to calculate that KPI, you fix it in the semantic layer, and then everything that's pointing at it and querying through that would be updated.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. Thanks for watching. Check out the rest of our channel for more FinOps content. Like, subscribe, and leave questions and comments for our speakers. We appreciate your support.